Okay, great. Thanks everyone for joining us for worship. And this is the fourth part of the series called Dividing Jesus, Offered Once for All. And this is an attempt to conquer the sanctuary message of our church. Like I said, the sanctuary message is really the foundation of our church, Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I hope that as we go forward, we can have better understanding, not only about the sanctuary message, but of the message of the gospel. And today is the fourth part. I entitled the fourth part, What is Atonement? The mechanism of atonement. Well, we already discussed that burnt offering is a sacrifice not for forgiveness of sin, but for establishment or confirmation or ratification of the covenant. But still, some of you, or maybe all of you, may be thinking that, still isn't the burnt offering about forgiveness of sin because of this verse. Leviticus chapter 1:4 says that he shall put his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. It is no surprise that we think that the burnt offering is about the forgiveness of sin because the word atonement is pretty much about forgiveness of sin. I looked the word atonement up in the dictionary in religious context. Reparation or expiation for sin. So like I said, it is no surprise that we think that the burnt offering is about the forgiveness of sin. But for the last three parts we discussed, I kept saying that the burnt offering is not about forgiveness of sin, but about establishment or confirmation or ratification of the covenant. So I thought that this would be the best time that we look at the meaning of the word atonement, because in the burnt offering it says that it makes the atonement for the person who brought the animal and laid his hand on it, right? And we tend to think that the atonement is about forgiveness of sin. So first we will look at what laying of hands means. Our church Bible commentary says that by placing their hands upon its head, Aaron and his sons identify themselves with it, and in figure transfer to it the guilt of their own sins and imperfections. So laying of hands, placing of hands means identifying themselves with it, and in figure transferring to it the guilt of their own sins and imperfections. Well, with the text that we will look at in a moment, laying of hands is not really about transferring of the guilt of some negative things. Transferred through laying of hands doesn't always mean transfer of sin. Let me give you some examples. So here, Genesis chapter 48, from 13 through 14, Joseph took them both, his sons, Ephraim with his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand towards Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. Then Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who is the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hand knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. We know this story somehow. So here in this story, laying of hands represents transferring of the blessings, right? Passing the blessings to the person that the hand is being laid on. And also, the promise of God is kind of handed or passed to the person that the hand is being laid, right? So in another occasion, Deuteronomy 34, it says, Now Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. So the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. So here too, laying of hands represents kind of passing the wisdom of Moses to Joshua, right? But in some other text, we also find laying of hands representing transferring of something negative. So here, Leviticus chapter 24, the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name of the Lord and cursed. So they brought him to Moses. Take outside the camp him who has cursed. Then let all who heard him lay their hands on his head, and let all the congregation stone him. Then you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, Whoever curses his God shall bear his sin. So here, laying of hands represents transferring something related to sin. So laying of hands represents not only transfer of sin, but transfer of something good too. So through laying of hands, atonement is made. So the word, the Hebrew word for atonement is kafar. It actually means to coat or cover with pitch. Well, the very first place where this word is used is in the story of Noah in Genesis 6. So make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with pitch. So cover with pitch. This is the word kafar. So if we kind of replace the word cover with pitch with the word that we are talking about now, atone, then we can say that God said, atone the ark, cover it with pitch. So Noah brought all the wood, and then he cut, and then he adjusted, and then he made this ark of wood. And then God said, okay, coat it, cover it with pitch. Basically, God said, okay, atone the ark. So when it was covered with pitch, we can say that, oh, the ark was atoned. Well, the reason why God said that the ark needed to be covered with pitch was because, if the ark with only wood sails on the water, then it soaks all the water, and then it becomes so heavy that it cannot float on the water for a long time. So it needed to be covered with pitch so that it can function as really the ark. After the pitch was put on the ark, then we can say that, oh, the ark was atoned. And the substance of pitch is sometimes called, so various forms of pitch may also be called tar or bitumen or asphalt. Pitch is asphalt, so I brought this picture. So of course all the roads, all the highways are covered with pitch or with asphalt. We put asphalt on the earth so that we can drive on a smooth road, right? And when the earth is covered with pitch, we can say that, oh, the earth is atoned. Or we can say, oh, the atonement is made for the earth. So atonement for the ark, transfer the attribute, the waterproof attribute of the pitch to the ark made of wood by covering it with pitch. And when we apply that principle into the burnt offering, so when the person laid his hand on the lamb or on the animal, atonement was made for him. So the lamb was covered with the person laying his hand on it. So the lamb is covered. So the attribute of the person is transferred to the animal so that it can be covered with the person. And the lamb is not seen anymore. So when the pitch was put on the ark, the wood itself is not seen. Even the color changed, right? So when the atonement was made, the lamb was not seen, but the person that was transferred to the lamb. So atonement means transfer me to the animal, transfer the person to the animal by placing of hands on it. Well, if we take a close look at the word atonement, the English word atonement, if we kind of divide into three parts, at 1 month, to become one, kind of, right? So we talked about the purpose of the burnt offering, that was to swear. So Abraham swore to obey God's commandments. Of course, God swore to fulfill his promise for Abraham and for his descendants. So when the person came, he swore to obey. And he laid his hand on the animal. So now the person who swore to obey now is transferred to the animal. When that laying of hands happened, then he shall put his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be the burnt offering, the lamb is accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. Because it is covered by the person. It is accepted on his behalf. Well, this idea is actually found even in the New Testament. So in the Romans, Paul said, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God. We already read this verse. It will be accepted on his behalf when we laid our hand on the head of the burnt offering and when we swear to obey God. You present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So you need to discern what is the will of God is for you, right? And then you give yourself to God, and that is a living sacrifice that is acceptable to God. But the question that we can pose here is that if we just transfer me, the swore to obey, to the animal, why not just swear, but bother to lay hands on it, right? We just can't swear to God, okay, we'll obey your words. Then what is the point of laying hands on the animal? The reason for laying of hands on the animal is because of this. Even though we swear to God that we will obey God's commandments, then what if we fail to obey, right? In case to fail to obey, the consequence of failing to obey is to be cut. We talked about the idea of cutting the animal into two pieces in Genesis chapter 15. And then we also talked about Abraham passing between the cut animals. So here, after putting his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf to make the atonement, and then kill the bull before the Lord. right? So this is the process of the burnt offering, and also this is the process of the atonement. So again, atonement is not the forgiveness of sin, but atonement is transfer of the person that laid his hand on the animal. And when we come to the atonement of sin offering, it's kind of slightly different from the burnt offering. Because, oh, by the way, for the sin offering, in Leviticus chapter 4, the reason for sin offering is given by God. So they're very clear. God says, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a person sins unintentionally against any of the commandments of the Lord. So God is giving the reason for Israelites to bring the sin offering. When? When a person sins unintentionally. When we come to the sin offering, we'll talk more about the difference between sinning intentionally or unintentionally. But anyway, God gave a clear reason for sin offering. But for burnt offering, well, not very clear. It is not very clear why they had to bring the burnt offering. Because it simply says, when any of you brings an offering to the Lord, it doesn't say the reason why they had to bring the burnt offering. We can guess or we can assume that, oh, God is not saying a clear reason why they had to bring the burnt offering. Then we can say, oh, the children of Israel, they may have already known the reason why they had to bring the burnt offering. Well, because of all the things that we talked about in the past parts, and also God must have told Moses. You know, actually, when Moses came to the king Pharaoh, he said that, oh, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, God of Israel is calling us to offer sacrifice, to worship. So Moses was told the reason why they were going to get out of Egypt and go to the land of Canaan, because of sacrifice, because of worship. So even to Moses, the reason for the burnt offering was given. And the children of Israel must have been aware of the reason. So here, laying of hands of the person, laying of hands of me, who broke the covenant unintentionally. But this time, it's a little bit different from the burnt offering, because when the hand was laid on the animal, that was not for the time when the person broke the covenant intentionally, but when the person swore to obey. Now you see the difference between the burnt offering and sin offering. So for the sin offering, when the person laid his hand on the animal, that was because of breaking the covenant unintentionally, right? So now, transfer of me, who is a sinner. But this time, the Bible doesn't say the atonement was made. Well, we'll look at that in just a moment. But, the blood for atonement was needed. So the animal was cut. They had blood. So the blood made the atonement for the person. Here, Leviticus chapter 17 verse 11 says that for the life of the flesh is in the blood. I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. So here in Leviticus chapter 17, it is very clear that it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. But if this principle is applied to the burnt offering, then we have some problem, because the atonement is made even before the bull was killed, even before the blood was shed. The process is a little bit different in the burnt offering, in the sin offering. So the blood identified or atoned with the sinner was put on a bowl, right? And then it was carried by the priest into the sanctuary, and then the blood was sprinkled to the veil. What does it represent? So it is transferred to the veil. So the veil, so in the blood, we are transferred into the blood, right? So the blood is atoned. So when the blood is sprinkled to the veil, we kind of are transferred to the veil, and then the veil is atoned. So here, Leviticus chapter 4, about sin offering, he shall bring the bull to the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord, lay his hand on the bull's head, but the Bible doesn't say the atonement was made for the person, and kill the bull before the Lord. And then the atonement is not mentioned here. Of course, the atonement is made because transfer happens, but atonement is not completed, is not finished. So it is in the process of transferring. And that's why the Bible doesn't say atonement is made. And then it keeps saying, laying their hands on the animal, and then kill the bull before the Lord. And then sprinkle 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil. So 7 times. So the 7 in the Bible represents completion, right? God created this whole earth in 7 days. He finished on the 7th day. So 7 represents completion. So when the blood was sprinkled on the veil 7 times, it represents now it is the process of transfer is finished. And then it says, so the priest shall make atonement for them, and it shall be forgiven them. So for burnt offerings atonement, laying of hand on the animal was enough. But for sin offerings atonement, the process of atonement is laying of hands. It was not enough. The blood had to be shed because the blood was atoned. And then the blood was sprinkled on the veil, and the veil was atoned. And then the process of atonement was finished. So for the burnt offerings of atonement, what was atoned was the animal, right? And then it was accepted on behalf of the person. But for sin offerings atonement, what was atoned eventually was the veil, not the animal. Well, the reason why the animal was brought and slaughtered was because the blood was needed, because the blood atones the person, right? And then the blood was sprinkled on the veil, and the final atonement was made. So, using this picture, so while the blood of the burnt offering is put around the altar, the blood of the burnt offering does not go into the first part of the sanctuary. It remains in the yard, and then it is put around the altar as a kind of sign of the oath of the person swearing to obey God's commandments. For the sin offering, the blood of the sin offering is put on the veil. It goes into the sanctuary, into the tabernacle. And then it is sprinkled on the veil. And the atonement is made. Laying of hands represents 2 things: transfer, identify. Even in our church, even some Adventists think that the live goat, we sometimes call it Azazel. Even some people think that the live goat, Azazel, represents Jesus. Because here in Leviticus chapter 16, it says, Aaron shall lay both hands on the head of the live goat, right? And transfer happens. Confess over it all the iniquities of the children of Israel and all their transgressions concerning all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat, and shall... So if the atonement is understood as the meaning of forgiveness, then the live goat forgives. But if we apply the principle, apply the meaning of burnt offering that we talked about today, it's just simply transfer, not about forgiveness. Then the sin is transferred to the live goat, Azazel. And the goat is identified with all the sins, all the sinners, and then sent it away into the wilderness. So if we understand the atonement as the meaning of forgiveness, then we are very likely to conclude that the live goat can be Jesus. But if we use the meaning of atonement, that is just simply transfer, then we can conclude that, oh, this live goat represents Satan that will take all the sins and then will be sent away, will be destroyed. So here, I just talked about it. So priest laying of hands. So sins, all the children of Israel's sins are transferred to the goat, right? And then it is identified. The goat is identified with all the sins, and then it is sent away in the wilderness. And this is what will happen when Jesus comes, because when Jesus comes, all the wicked will be dead, and Satan will be left alone here on earth for 1,000 years. So this represents the wilderness where there is no one, right? Well, the reason why we need to understand the meaning of atonement is because, well, at the end of the series, the Sanctuary series, we may come to a wrong conclusion, right? And that's why we need to understand. We need to have the kind of right understanding of atonement. So when we swear to God and then we lay our hands on the burnt offering, so we, as the person swearing to obey, is transferred to the animal, and then it is accepted to God. And then sin offering comes next. So before talking about sin offering, before talking about forgiveness of sin, first we need to understand what the foundation of God's government really is, right? And then we need to come to a realization that, oh, that is the beauty of God's law, and that is the foundation of God's government. And then we need to come into the covenant with God. We will serve you. Just like all the Israelites in the Old Testament, we will serve you. We will obey. Like other Christians say, oh, we don't have to obey because no. We still need to say we will obey, even though we may fall because of our sinful nature. At least we need to have the desire to obey God's law. Of course, we are not saved because we obey. We are saved because of the obedience of Jesus Christ. So in order for us to really appreciate what Jesus did for us, we need to come into the covenant first. And that's why we talked about the meaning of atonement today. I hope as we move forward, we can have better understanding what the sanctuary message really means and what the gospel really means.